There's so much going on. How about we do 2 shows today?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA Radio Network's Luke Robinson. That's me. Alabama internet legend Jimmy Stein. That's him. Want to thank you everydayers for listening every day, because you know what? You help make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network there is, and we're a part of that sports podcast network at Locked On Bama. So thank you guys very much. Jimmy, there's just too much to cram into one show. And with signing day being today and the news last night that, yes, Alabama did jump Notre Dame, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this episode right now. It's going to be plus or minus 30 minutes. And we're going to do an episode a little bit later that we're going to put out this afternoon. It's going to be plus or minus 30 minutes. This first episode is going to focus a little more on the rankings. We're going to keep the topics the same because it may bleed through. But we're going to talk about the rankings show first, and then get into some signing day stuff, and then finish up signing day stuff in the second episode later today. So first thing that comes to my mind is, yay, Luke finally got one right. Hey, Luke said, Luke being me, that Alabama would jump Notre Dame. It's the only thing that makes sense. And it wasn't that I had any inside information. Honest to God, it was eventually, I think people are forced to do the right thing. There's probably some German word for that, like Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in other people's demise. But eventually, you feel like, okay, people will do the right thing. Now, I've seen some Nicole Auerbachs and some other people going, oh, what did Alabama do against a 5-7 Auburn team? Maybe Notre Dame should schedule Auburn 12 times next year. And the funny thing about that, and I saw this tweet earlier, but it was also sent to me, the college football nerds responded to Nicole Auerbach's really dumb statement by saying, mathematically, playing 2025 Auburn 12 times would have given Notre Dame the #1 strength of schedule in the country. Currently, their strength of schedule is 42nd. They'd have a considerably lower probability of going 10-2 with a schedule of nothing but Auburns.
Yeah.
So, I mean, first of all, who the hell wants to play Auburn 12 times? Secondly,
that's one of the great takedowns of all time on Twitter, I thought, because
it's tremendous. And it just goes to show,
thought she was making a good point, but the math, leave it to the nerds to come up with the math.
The math ain't math.
Math says, Nicole, you're actually 180 degrees wrong.
And again, it's okay, because here's the deal. The playoff committee was wrong, and they corrected their mistake. It's totally okay to make a mistake and then correct it. I know that some people don't want to hear this, but if you have a missed call, I'll tell you what, for instance, let's go back to Tennessee 2022 for Alabama. If the conference had come out Monday and said, you know what, there was a clear targeting call, we don't understand why they reviewed the targeting call and said no targeting, because there was a clear targeting call in that game, or the pass interference, for instance. They could have said that wasn't pass interference, that wasn't that referee's call to make. Unfortunately, we can't change the outcome of the game. What happened, but yes, we will try to do better. I think people can eventually be like, okay, we're still mad, but we appreciate your acknowledging it. See, like, the whole thing with Yermark recently with, he's doing his little 6-7 jokes. By the way, we killed that joke a long time ago. So you don't get to kill a joke we already killed. Secondly, his whole thing about they're running, they're not running the ball well, or, this team seems to be playing better when really they aren't, et cetera. The right thing to do was look at the metrics and go, Alabama's played a tougher schedule. Alabama has more good wins. And yes, they have the worst loss of anybody in the top 12. I mean, I don't think that's debatable. We do, but we've more than made up for it. So quit bringing up the Florida State thing. We get it. And if you want to, Nicole Auerbach, continue to say over and over again, oh, what's the big deal in beating a 5-7 Auburn team? It's a big deal. It's a rivalry game. Every year it's tough, especially in Jordan. It's not as tough in Tuscaloosa, but when we play them in Auburn, they are playing gangbusters. So give them some credit. I don't like giving Auburn credit, and I'm telling you to give them credit.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of faith in the committee and still don't, even though they did the right thing and put Alabama ahead of Notre Dame. I thought Alabama would stay at 10, but only simply because, Alabama should have been ahead of Notre Dame in the initial poll. I felt every week Alabama should be ahead of Notre Dame, and they just weren't doing it, and I just don't have a lot of faith in the committee. They did ultimately get it right, I believe, strongly. And I think what I didn't fully consider, and Hunter Yurachek sort of hinted at this or kind of said this is kind of hinted at this is what happened. The committee is made up of multiple people. It's not one guy, one voice. It's multiple people. And it's very easy to imagine, with 12 people on a committee that maybe 7 of them were saying Notre Dame should be ahead of Alabama and 5 were saying Alabama. And then the Auburn game happens, and now it's crunch time. Now we got to decide what this is going to look like when the bracket comes out. All it took was probably just 2 people in the room, probably panicking over, I don't think we should be leaving Alabama out if they lose to Georgia, and just 2 people in the room switching how they had been voting. And it switched from 7-5 Notre Dame to 7-5 Alabama. I think that's very likely what happened. It's very close. Now, I think Alabama should be ahead, but for those that don't think it should be close, keep in mind that in the AP and the coaches poll, Notre Dame is ahead of Alabama, and those are, to some extent, college football experts, of course, or they wouldn't have votes, in those polls. So it is close, and I get it, and I get eye test, I get it all, but the metrics are just so clear here. And before the season, Luke, before the season even started, the College Football Playoff Committee told us, and we were told by the powers that be, that they were going to put more emphasis on strength of schedule in the metrics. They told that. They made a big story of it this summer. Well, Notre Dame's schedule's 42. Alabama's is 11. Alabama's got more quality wins than Notre Dame, and it's not even close. Ultimately, that should have been what won out, and it did. And now the good news is, it's hard to imagine. It is hard to imagine a scenario in which Alabama's not in the playoff now. I would recommend Alabama not getting blown out by Georgia Saturday. Don't do that. Don't do that. Other than that, it's hard to imagine a scenario where Alabama is now left out. Now they could lose and move down a spot to 10. That could happen, but you'd still be in.
Yeah, I think they could move. In fact, I still stand by what I said yesterday, that I think Alabama is either 10, 2, or 3. I think those are the only options.
I agree with you wholeheartedly now. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Well,
now, I think lose and they'll be 10, win, and probably 3. That's what and maybe 2.
Maybe 2. I mean, it is a little dependent on what happens with Texas Tech. Should Texas Tech lose, and assuming that Indiana's only a 4.5-point dog to Ohio State, but I feel like Ohio State's going to win that game, and maybe by double digits. So, and Georgia, of course, will have lost. So I think it'll go Ohio State, Alabama, should Alabama beat Georgia in that scenario. And yes, it'll cause some consternation for some people going, how does Alabama jump all these one-loss teams? Well, they will jump Ole Miss. Clearly, I think they'll jump Texas A&M. Clearly, they have a much better resume than either one of those teams.
How is an SEC team not going to be in the top 4? And how would you put someone ahead of Alabama if they win the SEC championship? How would you're going to continue to put Georgia ahead of Alabama? You can't do that. You're going to put Texas A&M or Ole Miss ahead of Alabama? They're weren't even in the championship game. So I agree with you completely. If Georgia wins, they're 2. If Alabama wins, I'll say they'll be 3.
If 3 is fine, you know what? And frankly, normally I wouldn't want to be 4, and I probably still wouldn't want to be that way. You hate to say it this way because it sounds like you're scared, but I would prefer to dodge Ohio State as long as I could because I think that's the easiest path.
You know who I want to dodge, which sounds crazy?
Georgia?
Considering we just beat them. If Alabama's 4, you know who's going to be 5? Georgia. I think Georgia's going to be 5. If Georgia loses, you think they fall below 5?
I think Indiana will be 5.
Really? Okay.
Well, think about this, Jimmy. Indiana does at least have a win over Oregon, and whether or not we believe them to be a fraud or not, or fraudulent.
If Indiana's 5, who are the 4 in front?
Okay, so if Indiana were a 5,
Uh,
whew, that's a good point because Indiana would probably still be a 4. You're
yeah,
right.
I don't see. I don't because
Um,
I think Oregon would
yeah,
then
you're
have to
right.
be in the top
You're
4, and I
right.
don't
That's
think
that's
because of
on
the
me.
head. But so point being, if Alabama's 4, I mean, I think Georgia's going to be 5, but I think you're better if Alabama's 3, Georgia 5. Then I think Oregon would be 6. So to me, the path is if Alabama wins, they get a bye, and then in the quarterfinals they're playing Oregon in a neutral site. Not
Well,
just
no,
kind of
I think that's the
right.
path, and I do think, by the way, let's talk about this a little bit more after I tell everybody about FanDuel because this is really intriguing.
Okay.
But of course, I want to tell you about FanDuel. Come on, man. FanDuel's our friend. I think FanDuel's got Alabama minus like 8,000 now to make the playoffs or something. So I'll check on that after I read this. But love me some FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. They do. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. Don't tell me about it. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. Everybody knows that. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and much, much more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast. So can you now.
And shout out to FanDuel for being kind of like the beacon that Alabama was going to flip over Notre Dame. I mean,
Yeah.
when FanDuel odds kind of changed dramatically Tuesday morning,
Yeah.
it's like it was hard to. It was obvious that FanDuel felt that was going to happen, and that was kind of a beacon as to what ultimately did happen. And couldn't be happier because we've said all year
Excuse me.
long for everybody that listens to the show all year long. Success for Alabama is going to be defined by making the playoff. You have to make the playoff in year 2 if you're Kalen DeBoer. You've got to do it, and then you lose to Florida State in the opener, which is a disaster. It looks even much worse today even than it did then, and yet still making the playoff and being in Atlanta. A remarkable season. Great job by Kalen DeBoer and his staff.
All right, I said minus 8,000. I was a little off. It's minus 1,500. Still a big, huge, big number. I mean, look, I heard some ESPN people saying if Alabama loses, they'll be out. I just read the room, people. You're wish casting and you hate Alabama, and that's fine. We don't care, Booger McFarland, that you and your gigantic head.
Past the 3 losses. If they just can't see past the 3 losses, like that's all they see. I mean, then why even have a committee? Again, if those people
Yeah.
that believe that it's just about counting losses, why have a committee? Or if you have a committee, why not make it fun by putting kindergartners on the committee because they can count to they can count to 1 or 2 or 3 and they would know who to because that's all you're doing. And
Damn, what kindergarten did you go to? I just
I
learned that
couldn't
until
count.
second grade.
Yeah,
All
it
right,
was
so
advanced. It was the Harvard of kindergarten. Where
we didn't even know it was second grade because we couldn't count that. So, all right. If Alabama, let's say Alabama wins. First of all, if Alabama loses, you and I both believe they'll be 10, and there's not much other place to go.
pending results of BYU Texas Tech, which could kind of throw the rankings into chaos a bit because you got to drop Texas Tech some if they lose to BYU, but BYU probably gets in it and now is BYU 10 depending on what happens Duke and Virginia because
I
that
think
could
I'd
affect
rather
where
BYU
BYU is seated. It could affect where BYU is seated if Duke and Virginia. If that goes the other way and Duke wins, I mean, does that mean is Duke in or is James Madison in? What if James Madison loses?
Ugh.
So
Okay, so
a lot's going to be determined Friday in terms of the playoff field, which is kind of fun because a lot of these Group of 5 games are Friday. The Group of 5.
that's about the only way you're going to get me to watch.
I'm interested in. I certainly. Hey, there's some good football. Tulane and North Texas. who are being coached now by the head coach of the University of Florida and the head coach of Oklahoma State. That's interesting. Of course, James Madison's playing for. And here's the thing: if James Madison loses, maybe the winner of the Mountain West comes into play here, because UNLV's not crazy low. And how about Dan Mullen? Probably should be getting a job in a major school, in my opinion. I mean, he goes to UNLV and wins immediately, has UNLV on at least in playoff discussion. He's a good football coach.
He is. All right. So back to the other teams, though, because, I mean, again, nobody thinks Tulane, North Texas, James Madison, any of those teams are going to make a lot of noise in this thing. And frankly, if we did this correctly, they wouldn't even be involved. They shouldn't be. I mean, I know some people for whatever reason, there is this faction of folks that want to make the college football playoffs similar to the basketball playoffs, where you can have some Cinderella story. Number one, I hate the Cinderella stories in basketball. I want to see the best teams play. I don't want some team to get hot in the tournament from northern Iowa somewhere that nobody's ever heard of, and they've got some nun that cheers for them. I don't care about any of that. I want to see Kentucky, or old Kentucky, not last night's Kentucky. I want to see UConn. I want to see Florida. I want to see Bama. That's what I want to see.
Somewhere there is a nun that cheers for Northern Iowa that I think is kind of offended.
I said somewhere in Northern Iowa, not even Northern Iowa. So if we were doing this correctly,
Northern Iowa, not a Catholic school, but there's probably a nun that roots for them. Probably.
Yeah, probably. If we were doing this correctly, Vandy and Texas would still have a shot at this thing. I don't know that they'd be in, but they'd still have a shot at this thing. And I do think, while Steve Sarkisian is coming off as somewhat whiny, because he's like, hey, if we had played, Ohio Wesleyan instead of Ohio State, we'd be in. He is right, except I would counter that with, Steve, I've seen your team play, and my bet is y'all would have lost somewhere else you shouldn't have lost.
Yeah, and you still lost to Florida. You still lost to Florida, even in
his went to
scenario.
Overtime with Kentucky.
And it would hang around his neck. The loss to Florida would hang around his neck like the Florida State loss affects Alabama to this day. Alabama on the verge. That's what we talked about. Alabama on the verge of being left out. Why? The loss to Florida State. Sark's got the loss to Florida and some rough wins over non-ranked teams like Kentucky and Mississippi State. I mean, it took them to overtime. Easily, those games could have gone the other way. So, but that said, if we're ranking the teams, who are the best teams in college football, I'd put Texas in the top 12. Probably
100%.
Yeah,
I'd also put Vandy in there.
Oh, absolutely. They're the team I truly feel sorry for, because they deserve to be in. There's just not a spot. They don't deserve to be in over someone who is in, but they deserve to be in the playoff. 10-2 with 2 road losses to good teams. And it feels not fair to say they're so unlikely to be in the spot again. I'm sure Vandy fans really disagree with that, especially after flipping Jared Curtis and
Owen
that
Cabell.
would be the most celebrated, and Owen Cabell from Alabama, which they did today. Vandy probably feels like they will be back in this, and maybe they will. I hope for their sake they are, but I do feel worse for Vanderbilt than any other team that's left out.
You say there's not a spot because who do you take out? And my answer to that would be, well, you take out either James Madison, Tulane, Northern Illinois, or whatever. That's what you do.
Yeah, but you can't because of the format.
Agreed.
Format's the format. And I agree that there's flaws in the format. But, in terms of why that happened, there's no NCAA commissioner. There's no one in charge. So who's in charge of college football and the college football playoff? The commissioners of the conferences. That's who's in charge. And you couldn't get a playoff format passed without 5 of those commissioners agreeing to the format. And the group of 5 just weren't going to agree to it unless they got at least one spot. So that's what happened. It's because the people in charge of this are actually the conference commissioners, including the 5 conference commissioners that make what we refer to as the group of 5. That's why. But that's why. For anybody who wants to know, why did they do? That's why.
Yeah. Again, I think the committee made the right move. I think it does guarantee an Alabama spot. And something you brought up, I don't remember if you said it on this show, but something you brought up, at least in private conversations, was, if Alabama had gone to the SEC championship game remain number 10, gone to the SEC championship game, lost, and been bumped out because of some BS, lucky crap from whoever else. I think that Greg Sankey would say, I got an idea. Y'all go have a tournament and we'll have a tournament. Now, before everybody says, well, that's just so arrogant. College football doesn't need the SEC. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do.
You do. We are the backbone. Now, Big Ten is a big part of that too. We give them that. But the ACC ain't even going to have a representative if Duke wins. So they are nothing. The ACC doesn't need to factor in. The Big 12 is, okay, yeah, somebody had to come from there, and maybe two somethings because you have BYU and Texas Tech potentially. But you need the SEC. And that is not being arrogant. That's just the truth. Look at the most watched teams. Guess where most of them are from? They are from the SEC.
And Sankey wouldn't have burned it all down because Alabama was getting hosed. He would have burned it all down because a loser of the SEC championship game got bumped out for participating in that game and losing. And that, it doesn't matter which team it was, it would have gotten the same reaction from Greg Sankey. He would have burned it all down if that was okay. Because, just think of this. While it doesn't take into account what you've done in the non-conference games, that's true. Alabama is not only in the SEC championship game, they're the number 1 seed. And by that, they're going to be wearing crimson while Georgia's wearing white because Alabama's the higher seed. Why is Alabama the higher seed? The head-to-head win over Georgia. So Alabama is technically, and boy, I said this and I put it in quotation marks, Alabama is technically the champion of the SEC because they're the number 1 seed. I put it in quotation marks, and I have a million Oklahoma Sooner fans killing me in the tweets for saying Alabama's a champion when actually it's a 4-way tie. That's why I use the quotation marks, because there's not a true champion of the SEC because you don't award a regular season championship and there's 4 teams tied at first. I'm aware of that. That's why I use the quotation marks. But point being, the number 1 seed in Atlanta in the SEC championship game isn't going to be in the playoff. That's sort of absurd. Now, you could come up with a scenario if Alabama had lost to Florida State, Wisconsin, and Eastern Illinois. Yeah, it doesn't matter that they were the number 1 seed in the SEC. They would be out. But that's just a silly hypothetical. That's not what happened.
All right, this part will be the first segment of probably 4 segments talking about recruiting. The other 3 will be in part 2 of today's podcast. But so far, Alabama has gotten a commitment, and I'm not sure if he's signed just yet, but Malik Franklin, who we talked about yesterday, 6'5", 6'6", 250 or so pounds, out of Daphne, coached by Kenny King, obviously. And he seems like a bit of a project potentially because his football background isn't extensive. He's been more of a good basketball player, it seems like, but his frame is there. I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend I think this guy comes in and makes a huge impact next year, but I do feel like, okay, give me a plenty of 6'5", 6'6" dudes who were 250 pounds from Mobile that played at the highest classification, and I will be like, okay, yeah, I'll take that dude.
Yeah, I'm super excited about Malik Franklin ending up in this class just simply because a month ago I thought it was just impossible. Malik sort of blew up around October when the offers started coming. Keep in mind, this is a kid who had not played football, who didn't go to camps. No one knew who he was. He just started playing games for Daphne, and it only took a month for Power 4 programs who watch Daphne, because it's a big program, go, who the heck is this guy? And then the next thing you know, here's Georgia Tech. Here's Oklahoma, who, by the way, knows a little thing or two about defense. Oklahoma got there early, and they thought they were going to get him. Meanwhile, I'm aware of the kid because I'm in Fairhope, so I know all the local kids, especially the ones who are creating a big stir. And my thought the whole time was, gosh, Alabama's already got 5 or 6 defensive linemen. All the money has been spoken for. There's just not going to be room for this guy. And plus, are you really going to take a kid you didn't have in camp? I just didn't really think Alabama could possibly be in the mix for Malik Franklin. Little did I know, Courtney Morgan actually came to Daphne, saw him in person. They were trying to get this done. Per Tim Watts, by the way, great reporting at BOL as usual. They were trying to get this done. Didn't have anything to do with J.J. Finch. They were trying to find a way to make it work. But Malik Franklin, and Luke's right in terms of the word project here is really interesting because that's what you would use as a term every time about a kid who's played so little football. He's a project. It's going to take a while. Well, this kid showed up in 7A football against as tough a schedule as basically anybody plays, something like 15, 13, 14, 15 sacks, 22 tackles for loss, 98 tackles from the defensive line position.
It's a lot.
He knows how to play. It didn't take him long. I would say a highly productive player against a 7A, 6A schedule, playing Spanish Fort, Saraland, all those teams. A kid that productive, it's hard to say that they're a project. But again, he hasn't played a lot of football. He's going to, here's another plus side to him. I know he's 6'6", 258 listed as an edge. This is an interior player. This is a kid that's going to weigh probably 290 in his time at Alabama, maybe 300, kind of grow like Jeremiah Beeman did. He's going to be a big dude, long arms. He's going to remain a pass rusher, but from the interior, he doesn't deserve a high ranking. Though Alabama had to beat Oklahoma for him, probably doesn't deserve a high ranking because he's a late bloomer, too late to just throw him in the rankings somewhere. But I'm as excited about Malik Franklin as really almost any of them. I think he's got a lot of Sunday traits.
It should, first of all, EJ Crowell, it just came through. He has signed. So, I mean, that was not one I was worried about, but you always love to get that over with. And then let's finish up this first part of recruiting talking about Owen Cabell, who has flipped from Alabama to Vanderbilt. And again, I'm not excusing any of it. I think we can just explain it. Number one, Tim Watts talked today about how, look, Alabama was only going to sign 1 to 2 wide receivers. That was the plan. They've got one in Cedarian Morgan, who's probably the best wide receiver in the country. Then they're still looking out for Samson Gash. He won't sign until the late period. They pretty much decided, hey, let's part ways with Brian Williams back in October. And now I think they wanted Owen Cabell, but I also don't think they're willing to give Owen Cabell significant or any NIL money, whereas Vanderbilt probably is. And Vanderbilt just signed Jared Curtis, and I think that's fine. Good luck to Owen Cabell. I liked him a lot. I would love to have him in this class. It is not a backbreaker.
That's exactly right. I mean, I did like Owen Cabell. We just have to learn to look at it's so much like free agency, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, however you want to look at it. It's free agency, and Alabama's offer to Owen Cabell was X, and that's what they were going to pay. And another team came along and said, well, we're going to offer you Y. And basically, to get in the details, as Tim Watts reported on BOL, what Owen Cabell had from Alabama was a scholarship offer, but there was not a rev share or the NIL attached to it. It's just, hey, you have a scholarship here, you have a spot here. He immediately accepted because he was excited. Vanderbilt had offered him a scholarship too, but Vanderbilt, in addition to that, offered him a significant rev share package, and so it's understandable why Owen Cabell would take that, particularly when he's going to get to stay home and play with Jared Curtis. Where obviously Vanderbilt's got a lot of momentum there, and Owen Cabell's probably going to play earlier there. I'm disappointed he won't be part of the class, but I also get it on his part and Alabama's part. The last thing you want to do, if you want to be to use baseball as an analogy, if you want to be non-competitive, overpay for free agents. Overpay for free agents. Then you're broke and not as good as everyone thought you'd be, and you don't have any extra money to actually go out and get good players because you've overspent. The rev share is capped. There is a cap on the rev share. You can't just spend more. NIL doesn't have a cap, but those deals have to be approved by the clearinghouse. So you can't guarantee to kids, oh, well, you'll make $2 million here in NIL. You don't know until the deals are submitted through the clearinghouse. So it's just the reality of the economics as well. But it is disappointing because I do think I'd look forward to seeing Owen Cabell at Alabama, and I think he's going to do extremely well at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I'll tell you the truth. I'm moderately happy for Vanderbilt. I mean, those fans have been through I was going to say hell, but if you've been in hell the whole time, do you really know it's hell? I mean, they've never been a factor.
They've
And
never been
now,
able to celebrate signing day like the rest of the league does with the 5 stars and the 4 stars.
exactly. So
Now
now they
now they're
sort of,
yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, this isn't so bad. Now they'll go back to hell later. They'll realize it is hell. But I think that
when
they've been
you
sort of in
lose
a,
players, now there'll be expectations
yeah,
and thinking they're going to get high level kids that end up going somewhere else. That even happens to Alabama. And how crazy is it? The Vanderbilt sitting here on signing day, beating Georgia for Jared Curtis, beating Alabama for Owen Cabell.
hey,
If you want to call it
congrats.
that way, and who knows? I bet their rev share deal to Jared Curtis was significant. I mean, everyone's going to spend their money differently, but we need to think of it in terms. Here's another good word for it: priority. Owen Cabell became a big priority for them. Wasn't a huge priority for Alabama. And what does priority mean? Rev share dollars.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So we want to remind everybody we will have a part 2 talking much more signing day stuff. We will release that here in a few hours. But for right now, check this out for us, and we will be back later this afternoon with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.